Thanks so much to Shepard for having me. You guys had me at the giant plate of smoked salmon. Like you get, there's like a tremendous quantity of lox. Like I'm here. This is amazing. So thank you guys, and thank you guys for coming out early. So I talked to some of you when I came in this morning, and I just wanted to get a sense, how many of you work solely on the trade show side or mostly on the trade show side? Okay, that's good. How many are in marketing? How many are kind of all kinds of event stuff? Anything that's events? Yeah, okay, great. And how many of you work directly with volunteer leaders, like committees or boards? All right, so about half of them. Okay, just wanted to get kind of a sense of that. So as they mentioned, I'm president of MCI USA, and I lead our association management and consulting team. We have about more than 100 talents in our DC headquarters office. We have offices in New York and Miami, and then MCI worldwide, we have more than 2,000 talents in 61 offices in 30 countries, so they keep us busy. But my role really has been as the CEO of a number of organizations before I came into the company, as well as then during with our clients. And now, luckily, for our clients, really, I don't touch them directly for the most part. I work with our 28 chief staff executives on developing strategy for our associations. And one of the things we really focus on is how we do both integrated and targeted marketing. And I think for the event space, it makes a lot of sense to kind of really think about this stuff. So you'll see that the title I have is 4 Generations, One Workplace. But there's an asterisk there, and who knows why there's an asterisk on 4? Anybody? It's because that new, oh, hello. So it's because the most recent generation, these poor little kids, including my own, who don't even have a name yet, right? Just like millennials or Gen Y, they're Gen Z or the re-generation. They'll get a name someday. The oldest of them are actually 20 and 21. And so they're actually coming in. So if you guys have very, very young entry-level workers, your interns that you see, et cetera, they're coming in and working with us. But our student members who are making the transition into professional membership for the associations that we serve, we're also starting to see them. So I will touch on them a little bit, but most of my content is going to be about the other 4. So just a kind of quick review, and this is what I'm calling them. There's other names. Did you notice, by the way, that you talked about boomers and millennials, and you didn't even bother to mention the much maligned Generation X that I'm a proud representative of? But just real quick, the greatest generation was born kind of pre-war end. You've got the boomers through 1960. We all know about the boomers. We can't hear enough about the boomers. The bitter, disenfranchised Generation Xers are 1961 through 79. Millennials, 80 through 95, and then this new generation, Generation Z, we'll call it today, is 1996 on. How many of us have kids who are in Gen Z? Yeah, okay, so we'll pay attention to that part for sure. When you look this up, you'll see, everyone screws around with these years a little bit, kind of, plus minus. We're gonna go with these for today, okay? So first thing, the kind of premise behind this is that each generation is impacted by both internal and external influences, right? So again, internal is what we kind of experience mostly within our home, our community, our cultures, geographically where we're from, ethnicity. And then our external factors are really kind of what we see happening on a global level. And I'm going to talk more about the external factors, and then we'll talk about how that kind of impacts how associations are run and how we do events, and how that model kind of needs to shift to accommodate kind of different expectations in the marketplace. Okay, so the greatest generation, they brought us to victory in World War II, obviously spent most of their adulthood very aware and afraid of the very real menace of the Cold War. We saw a huge boom in manufacturing technology, and as a result, this is when we went from like one kind of bread at the corner bakery to like 17 kinds of bread on our shelves, all with enough preservatives to last weeks and weeks and weeks. They witnessed and benefited from a real booming post-World War II economy, but yet they have depression-based roots, which I think is always really important when we think about folks. So they really experienced the extremes of our economy, both its very worst and really its very best. And then the growth of the suburbs, the real movement from urban areas, kind of the Levittown model. These are the folks that kind of helped us invest there, and then raised our boomers there. So as a result of a lot of these a lot of those factors, not surprisingly, they're joiners. These are folks who were rewarded and saw people reward for making the ultimate sacrifice for our country or a variety of countries globally. As a result, there's extreme loyalty to institutions and a real acceptance of the rules. You know, this is the way it is, great, I'm happy to conform for that. And when respectful of positional authority is a fancy way to say, you know, the hierarchy works for this group. They're if you're chair, I will listen to you. There's a chain of command, and that's very comfortable. And the real metric of success for this group is in part money, because as I mentioned, they still have kind of that depression awareness. Now this generation isn't really, for the most part, in the workplace. I say that, my former father-in-law at 76 is still an engineer and out there, but it's important to understand these are the folks that created the associations that we all serve today. And this is the model that's in place. Think about it. The hierarchy, the join because you should join because everyone's a joiner, and that's a good reason to come on board. The moving up the chairs model of leadership, right? Well, if you serve on this committee, someday you'll be a chair, and maybe then we'll put you on the board, and then you'll work through the board for 10 years. Maybe then you'll be chair, and then we need you to be, you know, first, second, pending chair, chair, immediate past chair, and thank you for your 25 years of volunteer service, right? But this model is very, very comfortable to this group, and this is still what a lot of us are stuck with. So, you know, again, their outlook is, you know, we want to preserve the past, a huge respect and attention to history. You know, you can kind of read it, I'm not going to read everything to you, but leadership by hierarchy, and they're looking at a seat at the table. They want respect, they want accolades, they want, but respect that's coming to them, respect that's earned. They're relatively patient and wait for that. So again, when you think about how we reward and present awards to our association members, you see a lot of that at play as well. So let's talk about the boomers. So, you know, it's an interesting time to grow up, not just because there were so many of them, but there were so many things that really shaped, I think, the beginnings of kind of what the modern culture we're still kind of experiencing today in this country. You had really seminal moments, both the Camelot presidency and, of course, the assassination of JFK, the tension around the Cuban Missile Crisis and really the launch of the Cold War, Vietnam, the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Liberation Movement, and also some really troubling times in terms of government. The most important thing about the boomers in many ways is they were surrounded by them, right? And really it was when American culture shifted to cater to, I mean, the real concept of the teenager, right, really didn't come into play until we had boomers in the marketplace that had all of this money to spend on movies and music and clothes and all of that good stuff. So the boomers are competitive. It tends to be very zero-sum when we think about kind of the peak earning power and professional attainment in kind of the 80s, early 90s, and you think about that, you can, that Wall Street kind of mode. Very hardworking and driven. That kind of streak, that Woodstock streak, that anti-authoritarian streak is still there and continue to be idealistic. And I still laugh when I see these pictures of older Americans as boomers, because that's still, I think, a mind shift. It's certainly a mind shift for me, and I imagine for the boomers it is especially. So, you know, I think that the big thing here is there's a love-hate view of authority. They love it when they are the people in authority, but they still chafe at kind of being held back by people who are older than them. At this point, most of the boomers we have in our organizations have really reached those leadership positions. They have long tenure. They're starting to think about what their legacy is in terms of their professional contributions. These are people who worked really, really hard and were career-focused. And they want networking value, and they will show up. The greatest generation and the boomers show up. They want face-to-face, attendance counts, and so they will be there. If they say they're going to be there, they're going to be there. Oh, Generation X. There's so few of us. Oops, sorry, let's get back there. So, very troubled economy, and a huge shift in corporate America. So this is a generation that saw the impact of a bad economy with a trickle down to seeing their parents and relatives laid off. When they entered the workforce themselves, it was actually a horrible economy. The early 90s, we forget, it was not a good time to enter the workforce. And we also saw a lot of instability In terms of, these are the kind of the first generation that came from a lot of divorce at the same time. We didn't have, I think, the infrastructure support system we have today in terms of how we deal with that. So a lot of kind of time dealing with a lot of family stress and probably a lack of a social safety net or support system for that made them feel very isolated as well. And the rise, of course, of electronic games. Pong. How many had Pong at home? I did. We were like the cool house, right, with the Pong, yeah. So as a result, Gen Xers have become self-reliant, mistrustful of institutions. These are not people who have any expectation that they're going to have a job for 25 years and get a gold watch. We don't have pensions. All of these things that were kind of a given have gone away. As a result, when you think on the association side, if you're going to have someone join a professional society, in the back of their head, they're like, is this going to be my profession for more than 5 years? I'm not sure. So that investment and that patience isn't going to be there for obvious reasons. I think that also Generation X is where we saw, because it's a very transient generation, it's actually a generation that's most likely to live a considerable distance away from their hometowns. They have kind of this tribal mentality. I have a picture of Friends up there as kind of as a symbol for that, but really kind of creating their own village, their own support system. I say that with a sick 11-year-old at home right now, and I have 3 different sets of work from home parents that are going to take all their calls from my house this morning, so I can be here and go to another meeting. So I'm very reliant on my own village. And very dedicated parents. I think that what you see with the Gen Xers is that because of their experiences of being kids of divorce and kids of very troubled time, they tend to be very, very family focused. Also, because again, they're not so sure that that reward will always be there from just work, there's much more integration. So a lot of the things that we see today in terms of work-life integration, demands for a really customized work experience, a lot of that was really fomented by these folks. So these are our skeptics, and they work, but they're also there at the Little League games and the practices, and they're good volunteers as well. They're not necessarily impressed by leadership, a title. They're very impressed by competence. If you do something well or you've achieved something, they will come. So if you have a keynote speaker who's like the grand poobah of XYZ, no. But if you have someone who's done a TED Talk on a really obscure subject, but it's amazing, these folks will show up. For participation, this is where we really see the migration of the all-inclusive model to the a la carte model of that sounds good. I know there's maybe a premium because I'm not a member, but that's fine. I don't want to commit to you. So if I have to pay an extra $100 for my registration because I'm not a member, that's fine, NBD. So it's a huge shift of how we've priced things and how we've packaged things and sold things, and that we're certainly seeing come across with the millennials as well. They're really looking for educational value. Again, they are out for number one because they don't necessarily think that their institution or organization has their back completely. So they're looking for something that they can suitcase with them regardless of wherever they go. And attendance is a maybe. It depends on the cause, depends what pops up at home. And can I just call in and see it, right? So this is, and also these are flakes, right? These are the people who will say yes, but not necessarily show. So I bet if you analyzed your no-shows and you did it by demographics, it would be really interesting to kind of see what, and you're all nodding, so I know that you know anecdotally this is the truth. So millennials, which we have to start referring to as so young because they're not that young anymore, right? So they're married and having kids and have positions of pretty remarkable authority. So obviously a really tumultuous time to grow up. We had 9/11, the rise of terrorism. These are kids who don't really have any memory of going onto a plane without taking their shoes off. There's also this rise of school violence and random shootings. Again, so really, really unstable. As well, this is I don't have my device, which I'm feeling twitchy about, but this is really the generation that has technology neck, right? These are the folks that we're going to end up, whoever's in orthopedics who's developing something for spinal support is going to make a fortune in like 50 years, right? Because this is the first generation that's constantly in that prayerful position over their phones. And so, we have the technology is just a given. Also very highly sexualized content at a very early age. Not a fun thing to say, but I will say it's interesting when we all do meetings in Europe and we see different standards of, say, dress or appearance or allowances for presentation, especially in exhibit halls, in terms of how they're marketing and selling, and then we come to the puritanical US. I wonder how that might shift and change as a result of this generation maybe being more comfortable in terms of what they see for sexuality. Certainly we saw a huge increase in working moms during this time, and a pretty great market to grow up during, although right as they entered adulthood we had the recession, and a very pro-child culture. Again, very much like the boomers in terms of how many of them, and again, we had this whole resurgence of this kid-focused culture. So they're very confident, right? And I think because they can be. They're coming after a generation that was smaller. There are jobs for these folks. There are opportunities to really customize your work experience. I think that I hear this all the time, like, well, I had to answer the phones and do it. I'm like, well, no one calls on the phone anymore. So a lot of these jobs that we all had, no one's faxing, no one's filing, no one's whatever, these jobs don't exist. And so we have to think about what the new entry level is, and I think that's very different as we work to kind of create that. They're very family-centric. I'm always stunned. I can't tell you how many job offers we've made where someone has said, they're going to check with their parents and give us a call back in 24 to 48 hours. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I've never had a conversation with my parents about anything related to my employment. I don't even know if my mom knows what I do, honestly. So, I mean, I'm kind of blown away by this. Oh, and of course I had to put these at the top. What are those guys? Medals and participation ribbons, right? So when we talked about the greatest generation and the fact that they're happy to get an accolade if they earn it, now we have a generation that expects it, right? They expect it. How many of you started to use badging in terms of the gamification with your apps at meetings? Anybody? Anyone just at ASAE in August? People were like cutting each other over this app and getting these little badges, and they're posting them on social media. I mean, it's really interesting for me to see some of this stuff start to trickle down. So we have leadership by achievement. These are achievement-oriented people. These are, for the most part with this generation, you need words of praise. For those of you who are familiar with the 7 languages, you need lots of words of praise. You need to tell them that they're doing a good job. They are used to getting a lot of reinforcement. It doesn't make them shallow or selfish. It's how we raised them. They're happy to pay for participation, but they are used to getting everything for free. Think about the new economy we have on our phone. It's funny, my older son has a phone and he asks for an app, and you know, you're like, $4.99, is this app made of gold, right? Which is such a weird economy, right? Like, this app does more than my Commodore 64 did, you know, back in the 80s, but because we're so used to getting things for free or 99 cents, it's very hard to go from a model there that you're selling information or an experience for a very low price point to what we're selling our experiences for. In attendance, again, it's a maybe. Can I access it virtually? Are we doing this via GTM or something like that? This is a group that's very comfortable with that, and there's an expectation there. In fact, you may be devalued in terms of the inability to access your experience, at least in part, virtually. So Generation Z, we're already thinking about the impacts, right? We've had, they have experienced this recession, this uncertainty around the economy. The recession's over, the uncertainty remains. It's really interesting too in terms of the integration of technology. This is the YouTube generation. This is the generation where literally they ask a question and they expect the answer immediately. I was tucking my younger son in, and he's obsessed with Greek mythology right now. And asked me what an aegis was. Does anyone know what an aegis is in here, by the way?
No.
Go ahead. Who knows it?
I said that would help you, right?
Right. Oh no. And I'm like, I know the literary construct. And he's like, no, it's a shield with like Medusa medallions. And I'm like already like backing away from him. He's like, can you just Google an image for me? I'm like, checking you in. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I'm like, well, learning. I mean, this is just the expectation. Whereas, like, well, we'll go to the library and look that up. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. So there's this constant. I'm driving and my kids are like, what causes a tornado? And I'm like, oh my God, like the demands on my parenting are huge. But they're used to it. They're literally like, oh, forget it, Mom, we already know. Like they've already done it in the back of the seat. Really fascinating when you think about that comfort and fluency and expectation that information is right there at their fingertips. And of course, diversity for this generation, it's just a given, right? And as we see the tipping point that we're about to hit in the next few years, where we're going to see that whites will become more and more the minority within the United States, this is something that they're already experiencing because they are the generation that's going to be the feeder into that demographic situation. So they're almost puzzled, I think, by some of the conversations that go on. and not up there, but I think is going to be a real pivotal point, is this current election. There's no question that the current election and the media coverage and the media saturation is different than any election, not just because of the polarizing personalities involved, although those personalities are making an impact on kids, trust me, but just because this is really a game changer for any number of reasons. I will say this, if my candidate of choice wins, I don't think it's, if you look on my Twitter, I don't think it'll be a secret of who I support. My kids, by the time they vote for the first time in an election, will only have experienced an African-American president for 2 terms and potentially a female president for 2 terms. That is mind-blowing, right? So really, really an interesting platform changer. And I'm not proselytizing here, I'm just saying that's a really fascinating situation to be in. So, you know, we have, we already know, looking in terms of this group that we're seeing, you know, an eco-focus, the information access I mentioned, and a real commitment to make a difference. Again, just like about the second half of the millennials, this is a group that will grow up with community service integrated into their schools throughout their entire experience. So I wanted to kind of just show you, what does this mean? So here is how the greatest generation was recruited into the Army, right? Uncle Sam telling you what to do. And you're like, okay, yes, I will do that. He wants to, you know, for the boomers, we see that join the people who join the Army. They want you to join the team. And that was a very, very appealing. This is right around kind of late 60s, early 70s Vietnam era recruitment. So for Gen X, we start actually seeing a woman in an ad for the first time. This is actually the very first time the military ever used a female in their recruiting campaign. And this is like a very 80s like shoulder pad statement, right? If you think about it, like what the most successful women are wearing this year. But again, this was hugely different. And unfortunately, I think that this is not popping to the front, so I apologize for that. But does anyone know what this campaign is? This is join an army of one. So this is the late generation X, early generation Y. Think about how different that is. These messages, same thing, we're joining the exact same thing, but think about how these messages, and you want to talk about recruitment and engagement, there's no one who does it better than the military. And now what's going on today, this fascinates me. There is more content for parents on the Army recruiting site than there are for the individual recruitees. I actually went and did a page count and analysis of that, right? So think about how that's working. Think about Uncle Sam in the first one versus this helpful drop down in case studies and videos here for parents. Very, very different situation. And I know that's not, but I think we can all think about how that's applicable to how we're selling our meetings. Are we pointing our finger at people and saying we expect you to be there because we're telling you to do so? Or are we engaging them and telling them what resources are there for them, their teams, even their family experience as they attend? It's a very, very different and interesting migration. So I know you guys, I know that Shepard's doing some work on millennials soon, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. But I will say that the big thing for the young, in fact, how am I doing on time, guys? How much more? 5? Great, okay. So hold on, sorry. And I'll post these, I'll send these so you can distribute them to everybody afterwards if that's helpful. So let me just get to this one. So rather than maligning each generation, and as the bitter flannel-wearing Nirvana listening to generation that I come from, perhaps that bitterness is consistent, but I feel like we just bitch about every young generation as they come in. They don't want to pay their dues, they're totally arrogant, they're entitled. Like, we said about everyone. I could throw quotes up from like the late 1800s where we said that, you know, 150 years ago. We all need to get over it a little bit, okay? And so I think that it's important to remember that every young generation always is less experienced. They always come in with less power, and they always come in with more uncertainty. They are unstable. They're not sure they're doing what they want to do. They're not sure what they're allowed to ask for within their companies or organizations to fully engage and participate. They're worried that by fully engaging and participating, their employers might view them as trying to angle for a new job. There's a lot of stuff there. And so, you know, young professionals have less experience within their careers, and specifically less experience with associations. And as a result, they place a premium on peer guidance, and they use technology to facilitate this peer knowledge and exchange. So you can't just have an event in a vacuum. You have to have that really robust, populated community for those of us who use any number of platforms, and that's essential. That's not a nice to have, or like, aren't we cool that we have this? That is just something that we have to do. And I think the other thing is just association awareness, right? Many young professionals don't even know about the association industry, that they exist, or that associations, the role within their industry or profession. And often the work of associations is at a very high level. For those of us who work with trade associations, the people on the board are CEOs. It's a company voting model. It's a very complex, very theoretical thing to explain to someone who maybe is in the first decade of their career. It's really challenging. How many of us have tried to explain associations to people who don't work in them, right? Like you have to go back to like, is someone in the Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts? Like, you know how there's, I mean, I do that all the time, right? Like where I try to kind of create a connection. You know, the PTA is a great one too. But it's really challenging to kind of explain how that works. And even the people who are immersed in, say, a Boy Scout troop, they don't think about the fact that there's like the den leaders and then there's like this whole hierarchy that goes all the way up and then it's a global organization. They just care that they've got enough people at the blue and gold banquet, like in the next week. So it is really challenging to kind of, and sometimes it's important for us to take a step back and say, we know that we're marketing with a lot of pizzazz, but are we really conveying the value proposition for this specific group? I can't tell you how many groups I go into, they're like, oh, we need more young people. You know, we don't have the young won't engage. I'm like, well, how are you creating opportunities for them to engage? Are they showing up? They don't know everyone looks super old, and everyone looks like they know each other already, and they're like, you know, forget it, I'd rather be at my desk, multitask, phone in, and not feel uncomfortable, right? So we have one shot to kind of get that right. And, you know, I think that the career benefits piece, just like the Xers, now everybody jumps around, by the way. Even boomers now have an average of something like 9 jobs professionally. After they complete whatever their terminal education is, right? And then I think for Gen Xers, it's estimated at 13, and I think for millennials, we're assuming that number is going to still bump up, right? 13 jobs, that's a lot. Although if I rattled off how many I've had, you know, that's, you know, and I've been at my company for 14 years, you know, it's still considerable. So that career benefits, but suitcasing them. What can you bring back to your office to make you look spectacular and get a promotion? That's great. But what's going to help you on your career path, regardless of where you're going or what you're going to do? That's a little bit more challenging to convey, but really important to people. I know they're using their company dime still 2/3 of the time at least, depending on the industry, but ultimately for them to even make the ask to their boss to go, they have to have a certain amount of enlightened self-interest to want to be able to make that request and burn that capital. And, you know, at the same time, you know, we can't underestimate the level of career commitment. They're young, they're early, but it's not that they're not focused in their career. I mean, I don't know who you guys are working with, but I can tell you the young folks in my office, and I say, oh, young folks, I sound like I'm, you know, 79, but they're amazing in terms of they work 24/7. The boundaries of 9 to 5 are gone. I actually think that within the next 5 years, you're going to see more and more of us, I think my company included. I think we're going to get rid of the standard workday for even more and more people, because I'm getting emails from people who are amazing at 11:30 at night. And we have that expectation now, but yet we still are annoyed when they don't have that butt in the seat at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and we can't have it both ways. It's not realistic. And I think also, you know, career education requirements, it's really interesting. Now we have people start up, and because we have this ready fire hose of information, we assume that people are going to get in there and have all of the tools. And a learning curve that used to take years may now only take 6 months because they have so much access and they kind of fake their way through some of that learning curve. But we still need to educate them. And I think that career and association linkage is what still we're not doing really well. We can't expect people to have this older school model that we talked about at the beginning of joining for joining's sake. We have to join because they're getting something out of it that's not just like this kumbaya experience, okay? They have plenty of kumbaya. They can go to a meetup down the street and get kumbaya. What they want to get from you is really tangible, rock solid information and skill building that will help them along the way. And I think for everybody, just in closing, you know, these are influences that are listed for younger people, but I can strip out the word young and any of the definitions of these. This is for everyone. The work-life balance is a BS term, but work-life integration of people, you know, managing that, of me taking a conference call where I'm like, good job and goal. You know, that's all very much, I think, a part of work. It's not really remarkable anymore. It's become a cliche and kind of a trope. You see it in movies and stuff all the time. This workload creep of now we have access to everything, and now I can be at a soccer game and see all these emails coming in and so how we're kind of helping people manage that. Certainly the information overload. How many people, when they wake up in the morning, they have like more than 100 emails in their box from all the stuff that comes in? It's challenging. But I think that the biggest things are these last two, these association alternatives and the competing opportunities for engagement. So an association, the killer app for an association used to be information. If you wanted research on some really obscure kind of concrete masonry, there was like one association that cared about it, studied it, and had their thick report that you'd pay a lot of money for. Now, I just Google concrete masonry and stuff pops up and it's all very transparent. So they lost that. So they lost kind of this ability to kind of control access to information. Those walls are gone. And then they also used to control the best and the brightest and access to them in the field, but now we know that we're a LinkedIn request away from meeting people. So associations have really had to start to change their value proposition because what they've been selling, what they've been promoting are now accessible for free, and on a local market basis, geography is really almost meaningless when it comes to connecting now. So you don't necessarily need to trek on out to Omaha to meet everybody. You can do that in different ways. And then the same thing is if they're yearning for face-to-face, and I do fervently believe that face-to-face is still incredibly valuable. It's certainly how I learn and connect and network and develop my business. But there are a lot for people who just crave that connection because they feel isolated at work. There's also, this building is a great example of it. This is WeWork space here. This is the ability to hotel and work in a flexible way. And so we have other options for folks. And so, there's always that thing that, your Starbucks is your second home and maybe your association's your third. Well, now your association keeps on getting kind of pushed farther and further down the list. So these are all things that I think we need to wrestle with. But I think it's really important to look at who our main consumers are now, which are really Gen Xers, and the folks coming up that have the biggest market power are our millennial generation. And we need to think about how we're marketing and creating products for them. And that's it. I'll go ahead and take questions if we have time.
Questions?
Come on, you guys. I'm powered up on locks. Go ahead.
With the younger generations, what's your take on their ability to delay gratification and to anticipate? Because in the live event business, we depend on the value of anticipation to receive something and participate in something 2 weeks, 2 months, a year down the road.
Did everyone hear that? It's all kind of this wrestle of delayed gratification. Here's what I would say. I think that the gratification has changed. So where it used to be, that gratification would be like me coming in like, but oh my God, I haven't seen you since last year. How are you? How are the kids, right? Now, like we're Facebook friends. Like I don't need to do that, right? So that kind of thing, that opportunity to connect with people and catch up and connect, that's happening somewhere else. And then they're not just getting your monthly magazine or whatever anymore. They're getting information on a daily or hourly basis from the organization. But if the production value is if they're going because it's a can't miss experience, then that's what they're looking forward to. But it means we have to really focus on, I think that the expectations for all of us in this room in terms of production value and design and how the interface and how usable and engaging this is, that line still goes up because we can't rely on any of all the feels that happened as a result of the other stuff going on. It's that delivery that's now 95% of how we're evaluated. So to me, it's building excitement of you can't miss this guy, we're going to release this. I mean, it's got to be something that they can only get there, but we have to build that conversation before the event. I think we don't do a good job of that. Event management, we're so focused on, oh my gosh, we got to get there, and the stuff's got to get there, and all the stuff has to be printed and stuff, and that we're not necessarily making sure that the teams that are dealing with engagement are starting those conversations and populating them and seeding them so that when people get there, they're like ready. Because that's, I think, what the expectation is. So I think it's different than it used to be. But I still think people look forward to it, right? People still, it's like Christmas, right? I mean, I see it, I see it in my office, I see it, I go to, lucky me, I go to about 15 board meetings a year, and usually I try to do that around a client conference or big meeting, and then obviously with my prospects, I'm going to meetings as well. And I still see people walk in and they're jazzed to be there. It feels big. They want to be people still want to be part of something big or bigger than themselves, but how we convey that is different. We want to create movements. I mean, that's what people are really looking for. It's not you need to be here because of who's in the room. You need to be here because of why, right? The why of what we're doing and why it's important. And that's we buy yogurt based on the why, right? How many of us are like, oh, pink breast cancer ribbon, awesome, I'm curing breast cancer with my yolk play. I mean, that's what people are expecting, right? From this cause, this mission, this something greater than themselves. And I think that some groups do that really well, and I think others are really struggling there. One more and then we'll go.
Are you seeing a lot of these assumptions about younger generations changing as they get older? And if so, how is that impacting the way that they participate with associations?
So I don't know that the assumptions change. I think people get older and more life happens. And so that shapes them. And I think that some of what I've talked about, you could talk about anyone early in their career, right? The difference is how we work now is so radically different than, this is all new. It's all, and it's not just new for people like me who get to work wherever I want to, because that's a great part of my job, but almost everybody in my office, has that ability to suitcase up. And I think we're still kind of rolling with that and figuring out what that means for a career path and professional growth. So, I think that's really going to be the change, is how we do a better job of institutionalizing and regulating that. I feel like now it's kind of a Wild West situation in a lot of organizations, especially within associations. We forget how small associations are. The average association is a staff size of 6. It's probably not your clients necessarily, for those of you selling in the room, but so you're looking at really, really small staffed enterprises, and I think that for younger folks engaged in those, if they're working for them, then that's also a different situation. All right, thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.